Hi, I'm Brian. Today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about a feature of CrashPlan that is very useful but can be sometimes difficult to understand. I'm talking about the frequency and versions settings. CrashPlan gives you the ability to control how versions of your files are backed up and how they are kept. Let's take a look at these settings together. Let's start by looking at where you view these settings in the CrashPlan admin console. Go to the admin console using your login URL. I'm using https://console.us2.crashplan.com, but you may have something different in between console and CrashPlan depending on which of our clouds you're in. You can set the frequency and versioning settings on the organization level or on an individual device. We'll look at how to do it for an organization, but know that you can set these differently for your devices if you choose to or don't have access to organizations on your product plan. To access your organizations, you can use the search bar and enter the name or hover over Administration on the navigation bar, then click Organizations. Once you're there, select the desired organization from the list. Once you've pulled up your organization, click on the Action menu in the upper right, then click on Device Backup Defaults from the list that appears. Once the Settings window opens, ensure that the Use Device Defaults from the parent box is not checked here on the General tab. This will allow you to make changes to the settings in this organization. Click on the Backup tab to navigate to the backup settings, then scroll down to the bottom of the tab. You should now see the frequency and versions settings. Let's talk about what each of these sliders represents and how they affect your backups. The frequency setting determines how often a new version of a file will be backed up. As you can see, mine is set to back up a new version every 15 minutes. To help understand this, let's talk about what this means for a file that is constantly being updated. When CrashPlan backs this file up, it marks it off of its to-do list. Because the file is constantly updated, CrashPlan will detect that it has changed and will add it back to its to-do list. Because of the frequency setting, CrashPlan won't immediately try to back the file up, but will wait until it has been 15 minutes since the last time it was backed up. This prevents the file from taking priority over other files being backed up and allows CrashPlan to ensure the entire to-do list is completed. If you have a large number of files that are in this state, you might want to reduce the frequency so that there's more time to back up the files that aren't frequently updated. I strongly recommend not increasing this beyond the every 15 minutes setting, or your backups may have a hard time completing. Now let's talk about how these retention settings work. Each of these sliders affects the versions that are kept for a different time period. For 1 week, keep a version controls the versions that are to be kept for the first week after they've been backed up. It makes sense to match this to your frequency, as is the case with mine. This means that we keep each version, one backed up every 15 minutes, for the first week. After 1 week, keep a version controls what versions are set to be pruned out after the first week. At this point, a version from every 15 minutes would be a lot, and it would be difficult or impossible to know which of those you'd want specifically. We start reducing the number of versions kept at this point. The setting I have is to keep one version from every day after the first week. After 90 days, keep a version controls which of the remaining versions are kept after 3 months have passed. As we get further from the time that a file was backed up, we reduce the frequency of versions that we keep. This is partially because it becomes less likely that we'll need a version from that time at all, and again, we're unlikely to be able to pinpoint an exact time that we would need it from, even if we did. My setting is to keep one version from every week beyond the first 3 months. After 1 year, keep a version, again, controls what is kept after a year. I have it set to keep one version from every month after the first year. For the constantly updated file we were talking about, we'll have all of these versions in the archive, but other files that are updated less frequently will have fewer or maybe only one version. We'll get to remove deleted files in a moment, but first let's talk about how these versions that get marked for pruning are removed. CrashPlan only removes things from archives during archive maintenance. This is a process that runs periodically on all archives to ensure that they are healthy and remove files and versions that no longer fall within the backup settings. This means that versions might not be within the settings that you have set here, but would still exist in the archive until archive maintenance runs. When maintenance runs, you'll likely see a drop in the size of your archive as these are removed. That's normal and nothing to be concerned about. The last slider in this area of the settings controls how quickly files are marked for removal from the archive after they have been removed from the endpoint that backed them up. This means that when CrashPlan detects that a file that was in its file selection has been removed from the computer, it makes a note to remove it from the archive after a certain time period has passed. This prevents the archive from being bloated with files that are no longer current and makes it so you don't have a bunch of old files that get returned to your computer if you do a full restore from your archive. Certain product plans have a cap on how high you can set this setting, so you may not be able to set it to never remove deleted files, depending on the plan that you have. These settings control how long CrashPlan keeps various versions of your files in your archive and can be modified as needed to ensure that CrashPlan has the files you need and runs well. If you have further questions about this, feel free to contact our support team. We're always happy to help.